All right, so today we'll talk about manipulating strings. As far as your assignments and such this week, we've got chapter 6 that we'll read through, and then you have assignment 3. That'll take you through what is known as the Ford project. There's a good video about this and how to get started. If you come down here to old videos and look at this one here, manipulating strings part 2, as well as assignment 3. So if you need a jump start or help getting started on that one, you should see this video here. As far as manipulating strings, another note, we won't meet Thursday for class. So we'll have this one here with the recordings, and then you have those extra videos to help you get you through. But on Thursday, just focused on the assignment. But we won't meet here physically in class. All right. So when working with strings, there's a couple different ways that we can use to manipulate those. So today we've talked about using single quotes in order to wrap strings. But if we have a single quote in there, for example, an apostrophe like analysis, that won't work because we'll need to either use double quotes in order to make that work so that we have that is Alice's cat. And that single quote will get ignored as long as it's between these two double quotes. Another way to do that is to use an escape character, in which case you'll use a backslash. And so you can put a backslash before that apostrophe, and that will work within this string of single quotes. So things that you can escape, you can use a backslash single quote, backslash double quote. Backslash T is going to count for a tab. So if you want a tab within a string, you would use /T. So for example, if I had something like print Jason /T seller, and I print that, you'll notice that there's a tab space between these two here. So if you want a tab to eliminate some things, or you want to organize the way things are printing out on the screen, you can put a /T within that string. If you wanted to go on a new line, you can use a /n. So if we use that same example above, you'll see that it puts it on a new line. Because I had a space here, it's actually going to do the new line right here and then move on to the next line. So I would have to adjust that if I wanted that. And then if you're going to escape a backslash for some reason that's in your string, you'll need to put another backslash in front of it. So a double backslash. Anybody have any questions over escape characters? Okay. Another way you can do this in Python is if you put an R, lowercase r, right before the string, it converts it to what's considered a raw string. And this will completely ignore all escape characters, prints and backslashes, etc. So in this case, I can do something like print, and then I have a lowercase r, and then however I format this string, that's how it's going to print it out. So if I have something like that is Jason's /T cat, notice that it's actually going to print the literal /T that's in there. It won't actually tab it over like you would expect it to go. All right. One that's useful when you guys are working within your program files is going to be the triple quotes. So if you need to escape a large block of something in there, or not necessarily escape, but you have a multi-line string that you're going to be printing out, for example, the header of this particular letter in this case, you can use 3 single quotes, and that will allow you to include all your line spacing the way you want it. So if I had something over here in my print, and I do my string equals, and then I can start my quote. So if I format my string to be in that fashion, you can see I got the 3 single quotes. I wanted double spacing here. If I wanted just single spacing on this one, I could then do a print my string, and it will print it in the fashion that we would go. So you can see it will print it with the exact spacing that I had already set up. That way I don't have to add slash tabs or slash new lines, etc. I can just set up 3 single quotes and then format it the way I want it structured here. Okay. Again, that's going to print anything that's in there. So if I had new line characters in there, I could do that. If you were to actually look at the line, you would automatically see new line characters within that string if you were to print out the actual line. All right, multi-line comments. This is what you guys will want to use. So for example, right now, when we talk about starting your homework assignments, you're using these 3 lines here. For example, when I get to your midterm project, I want an explanation of what your project is. So you'll use 3 double quotes, and then you'll say, this is my midterm project, which is a text adventure game. You could explain more and more of what you plan to do with it. And then you put 3 quotes in. And what that's going to do is create a comment here, similar to like what you're doing with these single hashtags, but this covers everything inside of it. So this will not execute as code at that point. So it's useful for doing large block descriptions of maybe a function that you're working on. For example, here they have a multi-line comment to explain what the spam function does. You may have an explanation of what your program is, all the packages I need to install, things like that. That's where you'll use multi-line comments. Anybody have any questions on that? Okay. We talked about lists and using indexes and being able to slice. You can also do the same thing on a string. So say I had a string that was like my string equals hello world. I can treat that like a list. So if I want to slice off just the last 3 characters of it, I would just say my string, or say the first 3 characters. I could do 0 to 3. And this could be what we'll call the first. Now, is this going to return me 3 or 2 back? If I say 0 to 3, right? First 2 characters. Because remember, we go up to 3, but not including 3. And then if I tell it to print that, it will slice out the first characters. In this case, it's 3, right? Remember that we start at 0. So 0, 1, 2 is going to get us 3 total things coming back. And it just sliced this part out here. And you can do this the same way where you use negative slices if you want to go from the backwards this way. So if you get a bunch of data in and you always need to trim off the first 2 letters for whatever reason, you could just tell it to do a slice of that particular line and always trim off those first 2. If you wanted the remaining, then in this case, if you wanted to always slice off the first 2, you would do something like 3 colon, and that says to the remaining of everything else. So now if I run this, you'll see that we get everything else and it just took off the first 3. Anybody have any questions on using that with strings? So you can treat a string like a list and do indexing and slicing on it. Okay. We can use the in and not in operators. So we talked about this again with lists. You can do the same thing with strings. So say I have this string here, hello world. If I want to check to see if the word hello is in there, I could say hello in hello world. In this case, I can say hello in my string. And I would get back a Boolean true or false. And I can use this in an if check. So if hello in my string, then do something. Note that if I put hello like this, but if I use a lowercase h, that is not the same. So it is case sensitive still as it is in the string. Anybody have any questions on using in and not in operators? Again, this would be useful if in an if statement, if you want to see if they type something in a string, or if you want to see if something is in a string, then you can print it back. Okay. Let's see here. If we look at this where we can put strings inside of other strings. So in this case, we have Al, then we have an age of 4,000. Then we could create a string that says, hello, my name is, and then you guys have done this today using string concatenation with that in there. And then we set string to this as well. Well, this is okay, but you have a bunch of string concatenation in order to do that. You can use what's called string interpolation. And this is kind of an older way of doing it, where you would say %s and %s in the spots that you would want to put in whatever's in there. And then you have a %, and then you name the two variables that you want to plug into those two spots. Now, again, this is an old way of doing it. This is the better way of doing it now, which is the F string method. So you just put an F in front of your string, and then you can plug these in. So an example of that over here is we have my string is hello world. We can set my age equal to 4,000. We could say name equals Jason Zeller. Put these in a quote. And then if I wanted to print a particular string, or if I wanted to set up a string, I just say F and then a single quote. I can write it out exactly like I would want it to be. So I could say my name is, and then I'm going to put name here. I am age. And my opening statement is my string. So if I print this, you can see that I formatted that exactly the way I wanted it and just put in squiggly brackets the name that we want. So here I use parentheses, but we use the squiggly brackets, and it will actually inject whatever variable in that particular point in time. So when the string comes out, it put my Jason Zeller in there, it put the age, and it put the hello statement right in the string. It's a whole lot better than trying to do a bunch of string concatenation, converting numbers over to integers or integers over to strings. You don't have to do any of that with an F statement. For example, here in age, it knows that it's an integer. It's going to go ahead and convert it over to a string. So much, much easier to use F strings. Anybody have any questions on using F strings? Okay. All right, so now we're going to get into some useful string methods. So for example, I have Jason Zeller here, right? If I wanted to convert that all to uppercase, I can use name.upper, and that's going to convert the entire variable to uppercase. So I could just say print name.upper. And then when I run that, it's going to print out the entire thing as uppercase. So where this is useful is if you get input from somebody like yes or no, in your guys' homework assignments, you've been doing like if, whatever they typed in. So you would have something like name equals input, etc., right? You would say if name, or do a yes or no type question. Yes, no. You could say if yes, no is equal to capital yes, or yes, no is equal to lowercase yes. And you guys have like all these different options, right? Because anybody can answer that however they want it. Instead of having to have multiple checks, we can simply say yes, no dot lower, and that will always convert whatever they typed in to lowercase. Now all we have to do is just check against the lowercase version of it. So if they typed in all capitals yes, if they used the capital Y yes, or if they typed all lowercase yes, they would hit our trigger of if. So dot upper, dot lower, it doesn't matter which direction you want to do it. It's handy to be able to check that. You could string these together if for some reason you wanted to. So you could convert it all to lowercase, and then you can convert it back up to uppercase. You could do a check that way. There may be a use case where you would need to do that. If you need just as simple as a check to make sure that everything is lowercase, you can use is lower. and it will return a Boolean true or false. Same way with uppercase. Is upper, we'll check to make sure that it's all uppercase, returning true or false. So it's a great way to sanitize your guys' input, check to make sure that somebody's typing in what you expected them to. You could double check and use dot lower to always clean that up. So along with those, there's a bunch of other methods available. For example, is alpha, which is going to make sure that everything you type in is alphanumeric or alpha characters. So it's just letters, no numbers. Is alnum is going to check to see that it's only letters and numbers and nothing else, no blank characters. Is decimal is going to look for specifically numeric numbers. So if you're saying enter in an age, right, we can do a check on is decimal to make sure that whatever they typed in is a letter or a number rather, without having to do the try int and convert it over into a try and accept statement. We can do a check right off the bat. Is space to see if it has just spaces, tabs, and new lines, and is title. Is title is the one that you guys will use the most. Anytime you ask for a name, instead of getting a name where somebody types in something like Jason Zeller, what I would rather that do is do an is title to it. So you can force them to type it with a capital letter and then the rest are lowercase until it gets to the next word. So you can always double check that they gave you a good, clean, valid name by using the dot is title. If not, then tell them to go back over in the loop and give them an example of how to type it correctly. Again, the better the code that you get from people or the better input you get from people, the cleaner your project's going to run. So again, you can double check all of this. For example, this first one, it's checking to see if it's all alpha numeric or alpha characters. This one is checking to see if it's all alpha, which it's not. It is going to be valid for alphanumeric because we have alpha and numeric characters. So great way to come back and really clean and sanitize up the data that you guys were looking at. You also have the dot starts with and dot ends with methods, which is going to check that whatever they typed in or whatever the string is starts with something or ends with something, again, returning a true or false Boolean. So if you need to double check that whatever they typed in started with something, then you could use this check. If you need to make sure that whatever they ended with is a number, you could do that check as well. Again, it's useful in the equal equals operators to make sure that people are doing it correctly. So like here, when I was having these if statements, that's actually a double equals, right? To make sure that it's equal to, not on that one, but on this is lower stuff. So it'd be equal, equal, yes, something like that. All right. Lots of methods that you can use on strings, and that's why this whole section is about manipulating strings. Dot join, what that will do, and it's useful for, is it allows you to join a bunch of items in a list with whatever you wanted to join in here. So for example, if we look at this one, I'll copy it out. What this will do is take the list of cats, bats, and rats in here, and we're going to do a comma join, but add a space to the end of it. So if I was to print this, notice how we get cats, bats, or cats, rats, and bats. If I change this instead of a comma, I want it to be a pipe symbol. I can do that. And so now it's going to put a pipe in between each one of those. If I want a space in between them all, I can do something like this. And it will iterate through each one of those in the list and space them out accordingly. So it's really handy to use join in order to join a bunch of different variables out of a list. So if you collected a bunch of items, put them in a list, and then you want to print them out in a nice, clean way, you can use the dot join. You can also use dot split. So dot split will take something in. So if we say, my name is Jason Zeller, that's what I have in as a string. So we're going to call this my string. And I want to get just my name out of this. Then I could split on a bunch of different things, or I could turn this whole thing into a list. So if I do a my string dot split, what that's going to do is split by default on spaces. So now if I look at this list, we're going to call this my list equals my string dot split. And now if we print my list, you'll see that we got each one of those broken up into different indexes. So now I can come back and I can do whatever manipulation I want to do with strings if I wanted to. Or I could go through this list and I could print it out in a different fashion. If I wanted to cut the last two things off there, I could. I could also check to see now if Jason in my list print true. And not true, that's not what I want. There we go. And you can see that we get that back out. So we can do a check to then convert it to a list and do all the things that we would normally do, like in and not in. But I don't actually have to convert this to a list because I can check my string directly and do the same thing. Notice how we still get back true, because you can use this same in and not in on a string. But there may be ways that you want to break up this really long string that you brought in for some reason, chop it up into little sections like this. So say I wanted to do something like let's import time. And when we converted that to that, we had this string here, right? We converted that to a list. So it's a per word basis now. We have my name is Jason Zeller. We could have something like for I in my list, print I, time dot sleep seconds. And if we run this, we can see how it will pause for 5 seconds, then print the next name, you know, the next word and on through. So 5 seconds is a little long, but if you did 0.5, you could see how it's kind of cascading down like that. You could use this to print things out with your individual projects. If you didn't want that to be on a separate line every time, then instead of I, we would say end equals nothing so that it doesn't put it on a new line, and we could run it and it would go through. Now, the problem is we don't have the spacing in there. So we could say end with and then put a space. Now you can kind of see how it's looking like a text editor as it goes through there. Now, if we didn't want to go in a word basis and we wanted to go on a per character basis, then we just loop through it one more time. So for X in I, print X with no space. Once it's done, we will print with an end like this. We'll do this on the outer loop. If we look at this little function I created, it's going to look something like this. So we can see where it's printing each one of those in. We're not getting the spacing that we want at the end of that. So let's do this. And 0.5 is a little short, so let's go 0.1. You can kind of see how you're getting it to text out. We just need to get it to add those spaces back between the words. But the faster you do that, then it becomes like a little typewriter and you guys can interact with your midterm projects. So there's a bunch of different ways to do that, but that's one way to do it. All right, so that is join and split. You can also split strings with what's called the partition method. What this is going to do is break them into separate sections. So say we had the string hello world and we say dot partition on W. It's going to break it into a tuple that has the first part of that string, the middle part being the W, and then the second part or the last part being whatever's left after that. So you can break it up to a before, whatever your separator was, and after if you wanted to. and this breaks it up into a tuple. You can also use the multiple assignment trick, for example, here, where we have before, sep, and after, and it would assign those variables of before, after being those different pieces. It's awfully quiet. You guys are ingesting this really fast or glazed eyes, one or the other. So when we get to justification, we can justify text. This one you'll want to pay attention to. So say we have hello as a string and we want to right justify that 10. What that's going to do is count the number of spaces total to 10 and then justify or add space, whatever we need in front of our string. So if our string is 5 characters, we're going to add 5 spaces before it, and this is the result of that string. If we wanted to add 20 spaces total, again, we take the first 5 based on the string that we had, and it would add 15 spaces in front of it. If you want to LJust, now it's going to go and add spaces in here. Now, say we didn't want to use spaces, say we wanted to use asterisks or hashtags or dashes, then we just pass the number total. Remember, this is the total number inside of here, comma, and then whatever character we want to fill that remaining space with. You can also use .center so that you could center a word in the middle of that total line space. Now, here where you have 20, right? It's going to be 20 characters total. That center part is 5, leaving us 15. Well, we can't evenly put 15 split between 2 sides. So one side is going to be bigger than the other. For example, here you have 6, 7, 8, and then this side is just 6 total, right? Or 7. So 7 and 8 is going to get us our 15. It's going to center it the best I can. If I want it completely center, then I would have to use 21 in order to completely center that. Anybody have any questions on using center, LJust, or rightjust? That will be on a quiz or a midterm, I can tell you that. So understand how to use that, practice it, play with it, because it will come up again. You can kind of work through these projects like they're talking about here with the picnic items. That's a great way to catch up there. Some other things we can do with strings is we can strip off white space. So say we have this spam equals and then we have a bunch of space in there. If we use .strip, it's going to strip all the white space before and after. If we use lstrip, it's going to strip everything off from the left. If we use rstrip, it strips off all the white space to the right. So this is, again, a way for us to be able to take that kind of text in from a user. We can manipulate it to make sure it's what we wanted. So if they put in a bunch of spaces, we could strip out all that white space and actually use whatever they typed. You can optionally strip out specific sections. So like here, if we say strip out anything that is AMP capital S, well, now we're going to strip out this. And then AMP capital S, we're going to strip it out here again, and we end up with bacon spam eggs. It's going to end up stripping out pieces of this text. It's not all the A's and not all the M's and not all the P's and the S's. It's this particular phrase we're stripping out. Anytime this occurs in our string, we're going to strip it out. All right, anybody have any questions on that? Okay, easygoing group today. Hopefully you guys are picking up on it. So when we deal with numerical values and characters, we'll use the .ord or the ord function as well as the chr function. The idea behind this is say you count A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? Or you count through 10 or 16, and then you want to start using numbers. Well, you can't do A plus 1 and get B, right? So to do that, we use ord, and then you pass in the character, and you will get a number back. In this case, it's 65 in the Unicode section. So every text character, every number, everything like that is written in Unicode. Python uses Unicode as an underlying language. So that returns a specific number back, which means I can do ORD A +1 and then take that number, and then I can pass that into CHR, whatever that number was, for example, 66, and it would return that character back. So if I was to look at this in my project, say I needed to do something where I'm at letter A and I wanted to get them to B, then I would say my ORD of A, this is going to be a num, and then I could say B num is equal to ORD, in this case, it's going to be a num +1. And now that I have my B, I can say my CHD of B num, and that will give me back the actual letter, and I could print that out at the end. So again, we're taking a num, we're just creating a variable. We're going to do an ORD A in order to get that number back. Then we're going to set a B variable by just adding +1. Does anybody remember how we can shorthand this line? We could just do something like a num plus equals 1, right? And then that's going to add 1 to whatever a num was. And then we can go back here and do a num here because we just incremented it. So if we print this, oh, it's my text here. So CHD not defined. I think I missed. Yeah, CHR. I'm sorry. There you go. So now we get B back. So it's kind of handy if you need to increment things in a list or you're trying to increment any kind of letter, number, etc. You can go get the ORD of that, which will give you back the Unicode number. You can add 1, add 10, whatever you want. So say we add 10 to it. We should now get back the 10th letter of the alphabet, or in this case, the 11th number. If you want to see if A is bigger than B, right? We can't test for that normally, but if we convert those to numbers, then we can do a mathematical operation like greater than, equal than, that kind of thing. So that's how you can test to see if A is greater than or equal to B, or less than in this case. Anybody have any questions with ORD and char? Okay, we'll keep moving along then. We have the Piperclip module. So just like I imported time over here as a module, right? We can import Piperclip. And what Piperclip is it allows you to interact with your clipboard on your PC. So whether you're using Linux or Windows, doesn't matter. We're going to use Piperclip. And once we bring that in, we can copy the text. So we can say Piperclip dot copy, and we can have whatever string that we had inside of here. Say this was a string that we actually had defined up above. So we can say my string equals my name is Jason. Then I could just say copy my string. And if I run this, if I go out here to my browser and I hit Control V, we can see that it pasted that in up here at the top. So I'm getting text out of my Python program that I can paste into something else. We can also use the paste command, which would allow me to paste into my project whatever I had inside of there as well. So if I wanted to pause and get something off my outside screen, I could say my input equals Piperclip dot paste. So now if I ended up copying, say, this entire line to my clipboard by hitting Control C, if I were to run my project, it would go out. I could print my input like this. And it's going to print out that whole line. So here it copied it because I copied it in, and then it's going to paste this in here. What I could do is just set this to my input, right? So input. If I run this, now it's coming into JSON because I keep copying this. So if I take this one out and actually run it again, let me grab this entire one. See how it pasted in everything that I had copied out of the program. So it's kind of handy if you're wanting to move large blocks of data in and out of Python, you can use the Piperclip module to use your clipboard that's based in your computer. So if you need to have them paste in their GPS coordinates for something like that, right? You don't want them to have to type that in. That's a big long string. But if they find them on Google Maps, then they can copy that out and paste that into your project. All right. Again, I encourage you to go through these projects. That's the only way you're going to really know and understand it, is to run through a couple of these examples and then test it out. This table printer is one that I used to use as a homework assignment for this section that's now been replaced by the Ford project. I encourage you to try to see if you can get this exact output here using this command here. So the goal is that you're going to write a function called print table to pull in this list of lists, but get it to print in this exact fashion. Now, you can Google and you can find out what the answer is to this. That's the reason I stopped using it as a homework assignment, because too many people were copying and pasting. But you can start to figure this out and how to use those type of things to justify, right? In this case, everything's right justified. So we grab this one, then this one is from this line, and this one is from this line. So we're pulling the 0 index of every inside list. We're going to put it together on one line, but we're right aligning each one of those individual variables. So it takes a little bit of code, but it's fairly easy to do. You can do this little zombie dice bot where it will sit there and pick all the different cups. This is a great way for you to kind of go through and test it. All right. Does anybody have any questions over this? There is a lot of material here. I encourage you, if this wasn't enough to cover it, say you go home and you realize I should ask questions, go back and look at the old videos for this particular section. Typically, because there's so many questions during this, it usually is a two-part thing for manipulating strings. So go back and watch part 1, then you can watch part 2. Again, this assignment 3 is actually setting you up for, I believe that's going to be a different assignment, actually. Let me go look at that. I think that's pointing to the old assignment 3. It is. This is pointing back to that print table data. So if you guys want to have it a way of doing that table data, this is the old assignment. But today's assignment is going to be covering the Ford project and how you can get started on it. So I'm going to go ahead and make these available, and it should get you started on the Ford project. So if we take a look at what the Ford project is, this is a bunch of table data, and their database manager is no longer available. So you have to take this data and use a single Python file to help gather some information that they need for management. So the first thing it's going to ask you to do is get your initial comments in. It then says create a dictionary for each one of these vehicles that has fields and keys of the values listed above. So what does that mean? That means that we're going to start with, say, car 1, and we're going to have the key of name and the value of car. Then you're going to have the key of introduced and the value of 1996, and kind of work your way through till you get one full dictionary of that first car. Again, those videos are going to kind of show you that. I pretty much give you the answers to the first 2 or 3 points on the homework assignment. So for example, this first one would be my, let's call it car 1 equals, then we're going to convert this. So name, and then the value. In this case, it's car. right? And then the second part is year introduced. And that value is 1996. And you just keep going down till you get all that data. Once you get done with this car, then you start on car 2 and go through all that data. You can copy and paste it in. You obviously don't have to type it all. But if you get it all set up to where each one of those is a dictionary, then what it says is write a function that will take all those dictionaries, in this case, a list of dictionaries. So at the end, when you get done with putting each one of these in a dictionary, you're going to have a list called cars, and you're going to put each one of those dictionaries in it. Car 1, car 2, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then you're going to write a function that goes through that loop and is able to return a new dictionary with just the name value as the key and the dictionary as the entire value. So instead of having this be your key and then this be the value, we're going to want this ka. And so that first one, you should get a result that looks like this, ka. And then the value part is this entire dictionary that looks like this with all these stuff inside of it. Again, the videos do a really good job of kind of explaining that to get you started. But remember, the biggest thing that trips people up on this homework assignment is I specifically say return a dictionary. Don't print it, just return it back to the user. You can test this by putting that function in a return and you can print it out to you. Because these last 10 points down here is where I specifically ask for you to print them in a certain way. So these points here ask for you to return something, whether it returns a dictionary, returns a list, this one returns another style dictionary. These are actually going to print the output from whatever this function was. This one will print whatever the output from this function was. This isn't an easy assignment. I'll tell you that. This one's a harder assignment. But try it, practice it this week. If you run into issues, email me and we can work through it. But definitely watch those videos. It will get you through, I'm pretty sure it takes you through about this far, or at least this first part here. So you should get at least 15 points just by watching the videos. This used to be one question on the midterm exam. Nobody passed that midterm exam. So I scrapped it and made this just its own little standalone. It's not a fault of everybody in here. I just didn't realize I was going to have a wide genre of students. So I've got computer networking students, I've got computer programming students, etc. With the big group of students in here, I had to bring it down a little bit so that people could bring it in. But you doing this in the Ford project, students have told me time and time again, it makes their midterm projects and their final projects a whole lot easier because they can understand how to work with lists and dictionaries. It's the #1 values you guys will use in your projects. Speaking of projects, we're now in what, week 6? So if we take a look forward as to what's coming up, next week is going to be our pattern matching with regular expressions. At the end of next week, we're going to review for the midterm exam. So this week you have assignment 3. Next week we cover regex, which is this pattern matching stuff. We'll do that on Monday or on Tuesday, sorry. And then on Thursday of next week is when your guys' midterm exam will be. And you guys can either do it in class here or you can do it anytime before Sunday. But we will at least do the review. We'll actually do the review on Thursday. Let's put it that way. So on Tuesday, we'll cover all the regex stuff. Thursday, we're going to cover the midterm review. And then you have until Sunday evening at midnight to take the midterm. But you'll want to pay attention to that all next week. There's a PowerPoint that I give you. All answers come from that PowerPoint. So if it's not on the PowerPoint, it's not in the midterm exam. And we'll do that during the review. All right, this week, just get assignment 3 done. I will get you back your assignment 2. Sorry, those haven't come back out yet. I will get those graded along with assignment 3s, and then we'll see your midterms. The good part is for the rest of the semester, you only have 1 homework assignment, 1 quiz, and the rest is all working on your projects.